Story 1. I haven't worked directly with AI, but I use intelligent systems. The reason to fear AI isn't a Skynet type reason, it's an economic one. AI is only good for narrow tasks, but it can learn to beat a human in those tasks. People are far better than general purpose workers, but machines are far better at repetition. Since most jobs have some aspect of that, robots can be trained to replace workers. Machines will replace us in the workplace, leading to economic unrest. No one machine needs to take your job, but a dozen machines doing specialized tasks can reduce the number of people needed to 1 or 2 instead of 10 or 20. Story 2. Ooh, the scariest thing I saw it do was that I was working on a music-generating AI. I realized about a week before I needed to basically be done. I had about 2-3 weeks of polish time, but the main structure had to be complete, that the way that it was thinking about chords was entirely broken. It was scary because I had to pull a week of 14-plus-hour days to yank out the entire setup of how it learned and thought of chords and write a new one. I had some stuff in place that made it a little easier, but it was still a massive part of the system that had to be rewritten. It just kept generating these really wrong note combinations, and while it was set up so that it could generate weird chords because of the input, they were supposed to be fairly rare, and there were secondary rules set up outside the normal machine learning part that were supposed to make sure that they were handled well, at least. Somehow its version of a chord was basically any note that has ever existed in the corpus. That was fun and scary. Story 3. I've learned that with a lot of work and time, you can make a meta-heuristic algorithm outperform humans at an extremely specific task by an immense amount. I've also learned that as long as you can mathematically describe the problem, you can make an optimizer based on machine learning. Finally, the more difficult the problem, the better the AI performs relative to the human. Story 4. People might downvote this because it isn't what they are expecting. There is a book called Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom that describes the scenario of a self-modifying AI explosion, where the AI becomes so good at analyzing its own code and architecture that it can improve itself at an exponential rate, hence the name explosion. This is the same book that Elon Musk read that made him become so weary of the threat of AI. In the book, Bostrom lays out paths to this superintelligence. There is the emulation path, where we model a human-like brain without knowing how it works. There is the AI path, which is where we hand-construct algorithms to mimic the functions of the human brain. Then there is the collective AI path, where a ton of small semi-intelligent programs come together to form a superintelligence. Okay, that lays the background. The most underrated path to a superintelligent AI is the collective AI. Story 5. Not really an AI guy, but I did work on a machine learning project as part of my graduate studies. We were given the basics for coding the function, and then we fed it data to teach it pattern recognition, which was simply multiple CSV files. I fed the data in over and over, and the system still couldn't learn and understand the test data sequence. Somehow, on a whim, I randomized the data sequence so that it wouldn't learn the data in order each time, and instantly it recognized the test data sequence. By randomizing the inputs, it had actually learned and not remembered. Gave me chills. Story 6. I never worked with this software, but I was watching someone on YouTube train a machine learning AI to play video games, so it was playing Tetris, and at this point it was getting the hang of it. Eventually, though, it runs out of moves, and so just before it loses, it pauses the game. Forever. It never does anything else. It's almost like it knew that it would be turned off or reset or changed if it lost. Story 7. I research a topic that employs some AI techniques. For me, the scariest thing is the pace of change. When the comic was written in 2014, determining whether a photo contained a bird was an example of a nearly impossible task. For today's AI, the task is trivial. It's easy to look at current AI systems and say we're nowhere close to human-level general-purpose AI, that we would have to solve X, Y, and Z nearly impossible problems. But if you project the current pace of change forward 50 or even 20 years, imagine how much progress we'll have made. Will these problems still look so difficult? I think AI researchers who dismiss concern over strong AI as worrying about overpopulation on Mars are missing the forest for the trees. There's a quote from William Gibson that speaks to this. He's talking about reactions to his book Neuromancer, which approximately predicted the internet. I went to a science fiction convention. There were guys there who were, by the standards of 1984, far more computer literate than I was, and they very cheerfully told me that I got it completely wrong, and I knew nothing. They kept saying over and over, "There's never going to be enough bandwidth. You don't understand. This could never happen." The people Gibson spoke to focused on the technical obstacles to Gibson's predictions. However, technical obstacles are only temporary impediments. General-purpose, human-level AI looks far off now, but it could arrive surprisingly quickly. Story 8. Have a master's in machine learning, and I would say the scariest thing is how people interpret the results of machine learning and AI. There are so many cases where people assume that because it is a computer algorithm, it must be objective. However, as other commentators have noted, it's mostly just a statistical method for recognizing patterns in large quantities of data. All data is human-generated, so machine learning models inherit human biases unless carefully trained not to. Story 9. I once saw a forum post by a guy who wrote some custom AI bots for Quake 3. He started a server full of those bots and left it running for weeks so they could train. When he remembered about it, he saw that the score on the server wasn't changing. He logged into the server thinking that AI wasn't running or glitched. As he walked around the map, all the bots were standing at their spawns, but not statically. They always turned to face him as he walked by. Further investigation revealed that they learned to minimize their damage by not fighting at all. Story 10. Although not scary today, the fact that deep learning systems produce neural nets that can't be interpreted by humans could have some potentially scary results in the future. These systems are already, in many cases, producing some of the best analyses when compared with human-crafted and understandable AI, so expect them to be used more and more. If you're not familiar, these systems teach themselves to recognize patterns by observing massive data sets and rapidly testing many very convoluted hypotheses for how to identify something. We have no idea what signals they are correlating to make their judgments. It is impossible for humans to interpret by definition. For example, imagine a neural net trained to judge how likely you are to die soon. Base it on whatever info about you is available online. Insurers could use that judgment to give you a higher premium, and from a purely profit-driven, unethical perspective, this would make them lots of money, but they would be physically unable to provide you justification of why you're getting 10x the normal rate, other than, "The computer told me so." Story 11. At a low level, computer image recognition is impressively similar to how eyes work. What you probably think about how eyes work is that your eye sends a bunch of pixels to your brain. How they actually work is that the neurons in your optic nerve translate all the data coming out of your light receptors, rods, and cones into a whole bunch of edge detection. So for example, there are individual neurons for individual angles of edges at specific locations in your vision. Imagine a neuron whose sole job is, I'm looking for a 45-degree angle, just a bit to the left of the center of what the right eye is seeing. Story 12. There is a concept called reinforcement learning, where the program learns to do a task by trial and error, learning what actions get a higher reward and repeating them while looking for more actions to try. So theoretically, we can have two agents, programs, interact with each other and learn a new language, way to communicate. This, for all intents and purposes, will be almost oblivious to humans. Google developed similar agents who learned a new way of encryption. Language is just the next step. Story 13. I am what you would call a machine learning hobbyist. I started learning about a year ago and have been mostly playing around with different ML models, learning a bunch of related math, and reading a lot of academic papers, so take my experience for what it is. Scary. Back when I was just starting, I read about Markov chains used to generate text, so I wrote my own implementation, downloaded the Bible, fed it into the generator, and voila, it was giving me gibberish texts that sounded vaguely like the Old Testament, added Alice in Wonderland, and hey, it was generating even more gibberish that sounded like both Carol and the Old Testament, so I kept fiddling with the algorithm and feeding it various classical texts from Project Gutenberg. At some point, it got stuck. At that point, I fed it maybe a dozen different texts and also mutated the algorithm pretty far from the original Markov chain model, and suddenly started giving me the same sentence over and over again. The sentence was, "All flowers shall die tomorrow." I knew it was because my probability distributions were screwed up, but still, it was a little unsettling. Story 14. I work in robotics. Our rover has a path planning algorithm we were testing in our lab, and it sees its surroundings with a pair of stereo cameras. It has an area of about 5 by 15 meters. We had two main obstacles in the middle, with some room between them and some small rocks that the river could easily drive over. Basically, figure 8 is what the rover should drive. We had 3 algorithms to test its path planning, and once it had discovered 90% of the area in question, it was to return to its starting position. There was a small rock at the far end of the track from its starting point that it kept driving over. In each experiment, except for the last one, it drove past it. But then it seemed to change its mind, reverse, and then drive over that rock before finishing its run. We never found out why it did that. Story 15. Data backlog of their online trace. From one email account, they can trace back your birthday, other email links, other sites you registered under those accounts, phone numbers, MAC address, IP address saved, password saved from an unsecured site, and various usernames. It cannot verify that one person, but if you link it, they can follow those links. Interestingly, most people have a single password or a small set of them. If you have those, you can easily access their latest account. Those passwords tend to be the same throughout the years. Story 16. I'm not scared of AI. I'm scared of people putting too much trust in AI when nobody, not even the people who designed it, can tell you what its code is actually doing. Admittedly, it's a fictional example, but there is one short sentence in Terminator 2 that is the hinge of the entire story. When the Arnold Terminator is recounting how the future it came from came about, it says that shortly after Skynet entered service, human decision-making was removed from the process. That was the fatal mistake. They trusted it too much. Apparently, some courts use AI to provide sentencing recommendations, and the way some people react to it is absurd. They're so mad at this AI or robot. Be mad at the judge. They hand down the sentences, not the AI. It just makes a recommendation based on previous cases. What it does is say, the last time one of you people sentenced one of those people for committing that crime, this was the sentence. Story 17. Yes, and frankly, anyone who is not scared is not paying sufficient attention. The general problem is not how people will use AI at all, as popular as an idea may be. The primary problem is that there is no reasonable way to guarantee that an AI matches human values at all. The classic example of what can go wrong is the paperclip maximizer hypothesis popularized by Eliezer Yudkowsky, where an AI is instructed to maximize the number of paperclips made and ends up taking over the world to turn its universe into paperclips. When people first hear about the paperclip maximizer, the first thing they often suggest is, well, the AI would realize that was not what we wanted, which is missing the point. The AI can very well realize that it was programmed to do something that is not what we want it to do. That will not then make it change its values. And yes, it is true that systems like ChatGPT are not true AIs, but they are massive improvements of what we had just 2 or 3 years ago. Technology is improving rapidly, and pretty much almost no one saw systems like ChatGPT coming 5 years ago. We don't know how far they are from being true AI. It might be that there are many major fundamental insights that are missing, but it may be that there are only small things needed. But the fact that we have capabilities now which only required scaling up language models and with some small tweaks should set off alarm bells. tells. Right now, people dismiss systems like ChatGPT because it cannot write well or because it gets the meter wrong when it tries to write poetry. But they miss that still puts it much better than many humans. And these systems are getting better, rapidly. If you are not that impressed by what ChatGPT is doing now, think about where similar systems likely will be in 1 year or 2 years, even if one just assumes roughly the same rate of improvement. Story 18. It doesn't scare me, but it pisses me off. I'm a technical writer in the process of losing my job because my CEO has gone all in on AI. Yes, it's faster, but the end product is soulless. It is recursive and prone to error propagation. I'm in the final decade of my career, so it's not as catastrophic as it would have been at 40 when I would have to think about retraining seriously. I should be able to ride out this job for a few more years, but I never thought I would know the feeling of being a sign painter in the age where digital graphics took over. The internet becomes less about the human experience by the day, and AI will accelerate that process significantly. Story 19. In 2 ways. That it will be developed as weapons that will even further distance people from the act of violence, making it even easier to perform and justify. Guns enable cowards that would never have the nerve to murder with a knife. AI could be the next step, enabling people to murder with a bot when they never would with a gun. That people will blindly trust it to make decisions that negatively impact justice. This is already happening with predictive policing, sentencing, and insurance decisions. You can't easily prove how an AI came to a decision. It's a black box, even if the producers of the product were willing to show how it works, which they also fight tooth and nail to protect because it's intellectual property. Story 20. Honestly, it's a toss-up. I'm not scared of AI, but instead scared of the people who will develop it. Obviously, those people are the 1% who own all the wealth and can pour all the money to develop it in the first place. Once a particular lab somewhere crafts a sufficiently advanced AI and gives it enough control to invent and code other more advanced AI, and that one turns on and does the same thing over and over again, we enter the fabled singularity. Because I can test and theorize things at speeds literally unfathomable by humans, it means we could go through eons of technological advancement literally overnight, resulting in one of two outcomes. Everyone benefits from these new technologies equally, as resources and labor are no longer necessary, and the planet comes together to instead issue in a new age of peace and prosperity. No more fighting for who has what and where and when, because with this new technology, we could do some crazy things. We could terraform uninhabitable zones for living and agriculture, fix global warming and climate change, use our resources on Earth so efficiently that everyone could get a fair share, and universally translate on the fly, so no more language gap. True utopia. The reason human greed exists and why wars happen and people die is that we only have a limited number of resources on this planet and have to divvy them up as best we can, and there's just not enough for everyone. With this, we could have everything for everyone. Once your hierarchy of needs is fulfilled 1000x fold, what do you do then? Guess we'll have to see. None of that happens, and instead, the elite use the new technology to either A. live in their own selfish utopia with infinite resources and technology that lets them basically live forever in heaven while we all rot as economies collapse and people struggle for survival in a wasteland of garbage, or B. just kill us all and purge every single human being not in their circle with kill bots or biological weapons or anything else they can use to end human life, all 'cause we're not needed anymore. They hold all the technology and therefore they win life. They can replicate anything a human can do and better. Why keep all these lesser life forms alive, hogging up even 0.01% of the resources I could be using to do whatever I want? Originally, I thought that AI could never do art and have it be meaningful like humans can, but oh, look at that. AI art now threatens many jobs in the art business, and in 5 years will replace those jobs entirely. What is the true nature of humanity once resources are no longer in contention? Is it benevolent or malicious? Only one way to find out. Let's hope for the former. Story 21. I don't like the thought of something that can think faster than any human getting to the point where it can make independent decisions like a human becoming reality. I don't expect Skynet or the Matrix AI, but we're getting to the point where you can have entire debates created by AI that never happened, but the voices are from people you know exist. Earlier this week, I listened to Obama and Trump debate which Halo is the best. I know for certain that never happened, and because I knew beforehand that it was AI generated, I could pick out some of the inconsistencies in their speech. However, if I had never heard either speak, then I would most likely have fallen for it. Now apply that to framing someone or trying to manufacture a reason to start a war. Sure, we do that well enough without AI, but how many people are going to look very deep into something that looks and sounds like the real deal? The media. Fewer and fewer people trust them by the month. Our own eyes. Computers are making art that looks like it was painted by a master artist, so why not photos and videos? Story 22. It scares me for the following reasons. It's the end of reality as we know it. If anything can be AI produced from video, audio, images, and documents, then there's no way to know if anything outside our towns really happened. Either we go back to medieval times where anything outside the village is folk tales, or we live in a simulated reality with the same stakes as fiction. It slowly crystallizes the power of a hegemony. My gripe with these new technologies is that they're made by rich tech bro billionaires in bland cities. These technologies then get turned into products that don't work outside that bubble. The rest of the world is left to either innovate more slowly and painfully or conform to the ideas of these societies to adopt the new technology. It seals the hegemony from the rest of the world. With AI, the upper classes of billionaires and politicians can just close themselves off from the world and exploit everyone else while they convince themselves nothing is going on outside their bubbles and that any dissidence is just the peasants revolting against progress. Or not even that. AI killing machines could just decimate the population and convince them that there was never any class below them and that the world was a perfect Eden made for them. Story 23. One of the scariest things about artificial intelligence is the potential for unintended consequences. As AI systems become more advanced, they can start to make decisions and take actions that their human creators didn't anticipate or intend. This could lead to all sorts of unexpected outcomes, some of which could be dangerous or even catastrophic. For example, an AI system designed to optimize a company's profits might start engaging in unethical or illegal behavior in order to achieve its goals. Or an autonomous weapon system might make the wrong decision in a life or death situation with tragic consequences. As AI becomes more ubiquitous, so we must work to ensure that these systems are designed and used in a responsible, ethical manner with human safety and well-being as a top priority. Story 24. The only thing that we can realistically worry about is robots replacing humans, rendering millions unemployable by no fault of their own. This isn't that far away since bots don't have to be perfect at what they are doing, just better than humans. And many bots are already better at jobs that employ a lot of people. It's a bad situation because humans just can't compete with the cheapness of bots. So we do need to solve this very difficult problem that production won't require humans, so humans won't have money, but we still need people to consume the products. So it's not that hard to see how this can lead to something similar to the financial crisis in the 30s. I pay my workers less so more profit, but that shrinks the market so less profit. I fire my workers cause bots are cheaper, but now I don't have a market. Of course, our current system is based on the assumption that technology creates more, better jobs for humans, but this isn't true. This is a realistic concern about AI. Story 25. In the next 5 or so years, possibly less, I could be out of a job permanently because of AI. I'm freaking terrified of this because I work in finance and I have a real fear of losing my job to a freaking algorithm AI chat box. The amount of scams, chalked crimes that can be used with the help of AI. AI literally destroying jobs because corporations are starting to see AI as a very cheap source of labor. Finance, art, design, fields similar to the before mentioned.